The average American household spends over $70,000 a year just to keep the lights on and the fridge stocked. Mennonite families in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana spend a fraction of that, eat better food, and haven't set foot in a grocery store in years. But this has nothing to do with religion or going without. These are practical methods your great-grandparents used every day before the modern economy convinced everyone to pay somebody else for everything. These are 20 Mennonite tricks most Americans have completely forgotten, and everyone still works today. Number 1, water glassing eggs. Right now, you probably buy eggs every week or two from the grocery store cooler. A dozen at a time, maybe 18 if you are feeling ambitious. Mennonite families preserve hundreds of eggs at once, and those eggs stay fresh for up to 18 months. Without a refrigerator, without a freezer, without any electricity at all. The method is called water glassing, and it has been used by homesteaders since the 1800s. You take fresh, unwashed eggs still sitting in a wicker basket, still coated in the natural protective layer called the bloom, and you lower them gently into a glass jar filled with a simple solution. 1 ounce of food-grade pickling lime, which is calcium hydroxide, mixed into 1 quart of distilled water. That is it. The lime seals the pores in the eggshell, and the eggs sit there on the pantry shelf, perfectly edible for over a year. The cost? About $5 worth of pickling lime will preserve hundreds of eggs. Compare that to buying eggs every single week at grocery store prices, and you start to understand why Mennonite families think the rest of us are doing it wrong. Number 2, hay box cooking. This one sounds almost too simple to be real. You bring a pot of food to a full boil on a wood stove, then you take the entire cast iron pot off the heat and pack it into an insulated wooden box filled with hay, wool blankets, or old towels. The trapped heat keeps cooking the food for hours using 0 additional fuel. Mennonite and Amish families have used this method for generations, especially when traveling by horse-drawn buggy to church gatherings or community events. They would start the meal in the morning kitchen, pack it into the insulated box, load it onto the buggy, and by the time they arrived at the church house, dinner was ready. According to the Aprovecchio Research Center, retained heat cooking saves between 20 and 80% of the fuel you would normally use. Beans, stews, soups, rice, oatmeal. Anything that simmers works, and because nothing is sitting over a flame, the food cannot burn, cannot boil over, and cannot overcook. You can build one with an old cooler and some spare blankets from the closet. Total cost is basically nothing. Number 3, meadow tea. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where Mennonite communities have lived for hundreds of years, there is a drink called meadow tea. It is not actually tea at all. It is fresh wild mint, foraged from the creek beds and meadows that run through the Pennsylvania Dutch countryside, steeped in boiling water, sweetened with sugar, and served cold in a glass pitcher. Meadow tea to Mennonites is what sweet tea is to Southerners. It shows up at every wedding reception, every church dinner, every family gathering on the front porch. And it costs nothing because the mint grows wild and spreads like crazy. If you plant 1 sprig of mint in your backyard garden, you will have more than you can use within a single season. You do not need tea bags, you do not need anything shipped from overseas, and there is no processing plant involved. Just a plant that grows in the ditch behind your house and a pot of hot water on the stove. Number 4, vinegar as a cleaning system. Walk into a Mennonite farmhouse and you will notice 2 things right away. Every surface in the kitchen is spotless and the whole house smells like. You will not find lavender plugins or chemical fragrances sitting on any shelf, just clean. The secret is plain white vinegar diluted with water. They use it on windows, countertops, hardwood floors, bathroom fixtures, and even laundry. A half and half mix of vinegar and water in a glass spray bottle handles most surfaces in the house. For tougher jobs, they add a little baking soda. For laundry, a cup of vinegar in the rinse cycle softens clothes and kills odors better than most commercial fabric softeners. 1-gallon jug of white vinegar costs about $3 and lasts weeks. The average American family spends over $600 a year on cleaning products, sprays, wipes, pods, and specialty solutions. Before refrigerators existed, people did not just let their food rot on the counter. They stored it underground in a root cellar, where the temperature stays between 32 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Mennonite families in the hills of Pennsylvania and Ohio still do this, and it is far more effective than most people realize. A well-built root cellar with wooden shelves and packed earth walls can store potatoes for 6 to 8 months. Carrots, apples, beets, turnips, cabbage, onions, and winter squash all keep for months in the right conditions. It runs on zero electricity and costs nothing month to month. Just a hole in the ground with proper ventilation and a heavy wooden door. The key is ventilation. You need a small intake vent near the floor and an exhaust vent near the ceiling to keep air circulating through walls. Too little and everything dries out. Mennonite families learned to read those conditions generations ago, and they still manage their roots. The families who do this are not doing it because they are old-fashioned. They are doing it because it works better than what replaced it. Number 6, lye soap from wood ash. If you heat your home with a cast iron wood stove, you already have the main ingredient for soap sitting in the firebox, and you are probably throwing it away every morning. Mennonite families have been making soap from wood ash since the 1700s. You leach water through a barrel of hardwood ash to extract lye, combine it with rendered animal fat, usually lard or tallow from the butchery. Then you pour it into wooden molds and let it cure on a shelf for a few weeks. One batch produces enough bars of soap to last a family months. It cleans dishes, clothes, skin, and hair, and you will never need a plastic bottle of anything from the store again. And the fat? That comes from the same animals they raised for food on the farm. The wood ash comes from the same stove they cook on in the kitchen. There are Mennonite women who have not bought a bar of soap, and the soap they make cleans better than most commercial brands because it has no fillers, no dyes, and no perfume. Just fat and lye, the same recipe their grandmothers used. Number 7, cold frame gardening. A cold frame is just a bottomless wooden box with a glass lid set on the ground over a garden bed. It traps heat from the sun and protects young plants from frost. Mennonite families use these simple frames to extend their growing season by 6 to 8 weeks on both ends. Planting seedlings. You can build one from scrap lumber and an old window from a demolished house in about an hour. Total cost is often $0 if you have the materials lying around in the barn. You angle the glass lid toward the south to catch the most sunlight, and you prop it open with a stick on warm afternoons so the plants do not overheat. At night, the glass holds in the warmth rising from the soil. The result is fresh lettuce, spinach, kale, and herbs in the kitchen weeks before your neighbors even put seeds in the ground. And in the fall, while everyone else is watching their garden die at the first frost, yours is still producing behind that pane of glass. Sauerkraut in a ceramic crock, pickled cucumbers in glass jars, pickled beets, fermented green beans. Mennonite kitchens are full of fermented foods lining the pantry shelves, and none of it requires refrigeration during the fermentation process. All you need is salt, the vegetable, a container, and time. The salt draws water out of the vegetable and creates a brine. Naturally occurring bacteria convert the sugars into lactic acid, which preserves the food and makes it nearly impossible for harmful bacteria to grow. The result is food that lasts for months in the cellar and is actually healthier than the fresh version because fermentation creates probiotics. Your great-grandmother probably had a crock of sauerkraut sitting in her cellar right now. Somewhere along the way, we traded that for a plastic bag from the refrigerated section. Number 9, cast iron is a lifetime kitchen. Mennonite families do not buy new cookware from a store. They inherit it from the generation before. A single cast iron, it will outlast the owner's children. Some families have cast iron pieces that have been in continuous use on wood stoves and gas ranges for over 100 years. The trick is the seasoning process. You coat the inside of the pan with a thin layer of oil, heat it in an oven past the oil's smoke point, and the oil polymerizes into a hard, slick. You never need Teflon, you never need chemicals, and you never have to replace your pans because the coating wore off and started flaking into your food. One good cast iron skillet from a hardware store costs around $30 and lasts forever. A set of modern nonstick pans costs twice that and ends up in a landfill within 5 years. And the irony is, a properly seasoned cast iron pan is actually more nonstick than the nonstick pans because the seasoning layer, they maintain it, they use it every day, and when the time comes, they hand it down to their children. Number 10, the Use It Up kitchen. In a Mennonite kitchen, food waste does not exist. Stale bread gets turned into bread pudding in a baking dish. Chicken bones go into the stock pot and come out as rich broth the next morning. Vegetable peels and scraps get saved for soup stock. If the fruit in the bowl is going soft, it becomes jam in a jar before sundown. Leftover roast from Sunday dinner gets chopped into hash in a cast iron skillet on Monday. And the bacon grease? That gets saved in a mason jar by the stove and used for cooking instead of butter or oil. This is not about being stingy. It is about recognizing that every piece of food represents labor. Somebody planted it in the garden, grew it through the summer, harvested it by hand, and prepared it in the kitchen. Throwing it away means all of that work was for nothing. If you want to follow this one rule, the Mennonite way to do it is simple. Before you throw anything away, ask yourself one question. What else could this become? If you are finding value in these old methods, hit that subscribe button. We cover forgotten skills and traditional ways of living that most people never learned, and we do it every week. Now, the next 10 tricks get even more practical. Number 11, gravity-fed water systems. If you have even a slight hill on your property, you can move water from a spring to a garden or a barn without a pump and without electricity. Mennonite families in the hilly farmland of Pennsylvania and Virginia have been running gravity-fed spring systems since before anyone in the county had a power line. A stone spring box or collection point sits uphill near the tree line. A pipe carries the water downhill across the pasture. You do not need an electric pump, a well pressure tank, or a monthly utility bill. Just physics and a piece of pipe running through the meadow. Number 12, tallow candles. When a Mennonite family butchers a cow or a deer in the barn, the fat does not get discarded with the scraps. It gets rendered into tallow in a pot on the stove, which is then poured into wooden molds with cotton wicks to make candles. One animal can produce enough tallow for dozens of candles, each one burning with a warm glow for hours on the kitchen table. The light is warm and steady, and the candles burn longer than most store-bought alternatives from the grocery aisle. The whole process takes an afternoon in the kitchen, and the materials cost nothing because the family already had them from the butchering. And unlike paraffin candles from the store, which are made from petroleum byproducts in a factory, tallow candles do not release synthetic chemicals into the air. Think about that for a second. We hand callers. You are heating your home with a wood stove, cooking dinner on the same stove, and now you are lighting the room with candles from the same animal you raised on your farm. Companion planting for pest control. Instead of buying chemical pesticides from the hardware store, Mennonite gardeners plant specific crops next to each other in the garden rows for natural pest control. Bright orange marigolds planted along tomato rows repel aphids and nematodes. Basil planted near pepper plants deters spider mites. Nasturtiums with their broad green leaves planted along garden borders act as a trap crop, attracting pests away from the vegetables you Cornell University's Cooperative Extension Program, among others, has confirmed that companion planting measurably reduces pest pressure in home gardens. The difference is that Mennonite families figured it out generations ago by paying attention to what grew well together in the same soil and what did not. You do not need spray from a can, you do not need chemicals in a jug, and you never have to walk into a hardware store for any of it. Just the right plant in the right place in the garden bed. Number 14, quilting for insulation.
A Mennonite quilt draped over a bed will keep you warmer than most people expect, because it works like an engineered insulation system.
Multiple layers of fabric with cotton batting stitched in between trap dead air, which is one of the best insulators that exists. A thick, well-made quilt will keep you warmer on a January night than any commercial comforter you can buy from a department store. Mennonite women often use fabric scraps from worn-out clothing, old feed sacks, and leftover material from other sewing projects. The scraps get cut into geometric patterns and stitched together by hand, which means every quilt is unique and every piece of fabric. Quilting circles are also community events held in the living room or the church hall. Women gather around the frame, work together with needles and thread, talk about their families, share food from the kitchen, and produce something useful at the same time. The quilt is the product. The community is the real reason everyone shows up. Number 15, sun drying and dehydration. Mennonite families dry herbs, fruits, vegetables, and meat using nothing but air circulation and sunlight streaming through the kitchen window and across the backyard. Bundles of herbs get tied with twine and hung upside down from kitchen rafters and barn beams. Apple slices go onto wooden drying racks with screen mesh in the direct sun. Strips of beef and venison get sliced thin with a knife, salted, and dried into jerky on a wooden frame in the yard. The dried food takes up a fraction of the storage space on the pantry shelf, weighs almost nothing, and lasts for months or even years without refrigeration. A bushel of fresh apples from the orchard that would rot in 2 weeks becomes a bag of dried apple rings that last all winter in a cotton sack. Dried herbs from the backyard garden replace every spice jar you would normally buy at the grocery store. The best part is the equipment. You do not need a fancy electric dehydrator from a catalog. A wooden frame with some screen mesh stretched across it, set in the sun on the back porch with good airflow, does the same job that people have been doing for thousands of years. Mennonite families are just the ones who never stop doing it. Number 16, rainwater collection. A tin metal roof with gutters and a downspout feeding into a large wooden barrel is one of the simplest systems a Mennonite family builds. 1 inch of rain falling on a 1,000 square foot barn roof produces over 600 gallons of water flowing into the collection barrels. That is enough to keep a large vegetable garden going between rainstorms without ever touching the well or the municipal supply. Collected rainwater sitting in the barrel is softer than well water, contains no chlorine, and plants actually grow better with it than they do with treated water from the tap. The whole setup costs less than $100 and pays for itself within a single growing season of tomatoes and beans. Some Mennonite families connect multiple barrels in a series along the barn wall, so when one fills up, the overflow feeds into the next through a connecting pipe. By the end of a rainy week, they have hundreds of gallons stored in the shade and ready for the dry stretch that always follows in midsummer. Number 17, canning and pressure canning. Pressure canning. Walk into the basement cellar of a Mennonite farmhouse in October and you will see hundreds of glass mason jars lining the wooden shelves from floor to ceiling. Tomatoes, green beans, sweet corn, peaches, applesauce, jams, pickled cucumbers, salsa, chicken broth, and even chunks of pork and beef. All of it preserved at the peak of freshness during the summer harvest, all of it shelf-stable for a year or more sitting in the cool cellar. Water bath canning in a large pot handles acidic foods like tomatoes and fruits. Pressure canning with a heavy-lidded pressure canner handles everything else, including meat, soups, and low-acid vegetables like green beans and corn. The equipment costs around $100 one time at a farm supply store. The mason jars with their glass walls and metal rings are reusable year after year, and you just replace the flat lids, which cost about $50. A family that grows a vegetable garden and cans the harvest through the summer can realistically cut their grocery bill by half or more. There is a reason Mennonite women start canning in July when the first tomatoes ripen and do not stop until October when the last of the apples come in from the orchard. When winter comes and the garden is frozen under snow, those shelves full of colorful jars in the cellar are the difference between eating well and wood ash in the garden. In a Mennonite household, the wood ash sitting in the bottom of the cast iron stove never goes to waste. They scatter it across the garden beds in thin layers, where it raises the pH of acidic soil, adds calcium and potassium to the. A thin ring of ash around the base of tomato plants in the garden provides the calcium those plants need to prevent blossom end rot, which is one of the most. You can also mix wood ash with water in a bucket to make a basic lye solution for cleaning kitchen surfaces. One material from the fireplace, at least 4 or 5 different uses depending on who you ask, and every bit of it free. You probably look at a fireplace full of gray ash and see a mess to clean up. A Mennonite family looks at the same pile and sees fertilizer for the garden, pest control for the rows, and soap ingredients for the kitchen. When a Mennonite family needs a new barn raised on their property, they do not hire a contractor or a construction crew from town. Dozens of men in work clothes show up at dawn with their own tools, and by sundown, the timber frame barn is standing against the sky. The women prepare the meals on long tables in the yard. The children help carry boards and nails where they can. Nobody sends an invoice at the end of the day. The whole thing runs on trust and the expectation that the favor comes back around. When your neighbor down the road needs a new roof on the farmhouse, you show up with your hammer. When you need a fence built along the pasture, they show up with theirs. No money changes hands, but the value of the labor is enormous. A barn that would cost $50,000 or more to build with hired contractors from the city gets built in a single day for the cost of lumber and nails from the supply yard. And the thing most people miss about this system is that it is not just about saving money. It is about building relationships that make the money less necessary in the first place. Number 20, teaching children by doing. This is the one that ties all the others together. In Mennonite communities across the countryside, children do not learn these skills from a textbook sitting at a desk. They learn by standing next to their parents in the kitchen, in the garden, and in the barn, and doing the work with their own hands. A 6-year-old collects eggs from the hen house and knows how to check each shell for cracks. A 10-year-old can walk through the vegetable garden and identify every plant in every row and tell you when each one is ready to harvest. A 2-year-old can preserve food in jars, build a fire in the stove, and cook a full meal from scratch on a Saturday morning. By the time they are adults, they do not need to look up how to do anything around the house or the farm. They already know because somebody showed them with patient hands and quiet repetition. And one day, they will stand in the same kitchen. That is the real trick the Mennonites figured out. All of these skills, the egg preserving, the cooking, the gardening, the building, none of it matters if you do not pass it on to the next generation. The knowledge itself is the most valuable thing any family owns. And unlike everything else on this list, you cannot buy it at any store. If you want to see how the Amish handle the same kind of self-reliance with even stricter rules about technology, that video is on your screen right now.